Welcome. Let's start by recognizing something that we can all agree on. None of us like feeling bad about ourselves. So it's very natural we want to do something about it. We want to feel better about ourselves. And that can be expressed in terms of wanting to raise our self-esteem. We want to improve our sense of self. But there is a trap waiting for us if we go into this with a blindfold on. And this video is about taking that blindfold off. So let's step back a minute and think about what self-esteem is. And if you look in the dictionary, it just says self-esteem is how we think about ourselves. So our sense of self is actually made up of how we think about ourselves. And while this might not be very strong when we're very young, as we grow up, we form a sense of self, we get a sense of individuality, and that is again very natural and helps us navigate through the world as we grow up. But there is also, if you like, a downside to that, because we can, as we grow up, get into a situation where we start comparing ourselves with other people. And thoughts will occur to us which bring with them disturbing feelings. So, for example, let's say that we're young, we're in school, we see somebody in the playground that can run faster than we can. So we notice that fact and then make something more of it. We identify with it and we get into a mindset where we think we are a lesser person because we can't run as fast as that other child. And we can also find that other times in our lives, thoughts occur to us which again bring disturbing feelings about our sense of self. And we then try to fix that. It looks like there's something wrong with us and we need to improve ourselves. We need to up our game. We need to be better people. And that is where the trap lies. Because if we start to think more about the feelings that we're getting, the feelings of not feeling very good about ourselves, we start digging into that with the mindset there's something wrong and we need to fix it. Those thoughts about our inadequacies and our deficiencies will stick around longer because we're giving them more attention. And then we find that those disturbing feelings stay with us longer. And it can become a downward spiral. You know, the more we think about fixing ourselves, the more effort we put in to try and fix ourselves, the longer those uncomfortable feelings stay around. And it's almost like a law of diminishing returns. So let's take the blindfold off and see what else is possible. Now we know that thoughts will occur to us sometimes, just out the blue. They arrive in our minds, we don't have any control over that, they just arrive. But we do have the choice whether we spend time with them or not, whether we give them more attention or not. And if we don't give them much attention, they will fade away and they'll be replaced by other thoughts. It's a bit like a flow of a river, you know, unless we dam the river, the water will keep passing. Same with thoughts. And when we think about our sense of self, made up of thinking, you know, we've said that self-esteem is how we think about ourselves. Although that sense of self can seem very substantial, solid, almost immovable, it is actually made up of thinking. And we just said that thoughts come and go if you let them. They're more flimsy than perhaps they first seem. And knowing that means that this sense of self is much more ephemeral than perhaps we're led to believe. I mean, culturally, we're very much brought up to think of ourselves as individuals and therefore to differentiate ourselves from all the people around us. What makes us different? You know, and that again can invite comparison. So we can do a lot of thinking around that individuality. And up to a point, that's as we've said earlier, perfectly fine. It's only when we start to dwell on some of the thinking about ourselves, our self-worth, how good a person we are, that can bring those disturbing feelings. So that's the other thing to recognise, that whatever we're thinking is creating the feelings that we're experiencing. So if we have thinking about ourselves which is negative or disparaging, self-deprecating, then we're going to get the relevant feelings that go with that, and they don't feel so great. So by letting the feelings, rather letting this thinking pass, the feelings will pass too. So rather than perhaps putting all the emphasis on what makes us different from everybody else, what creates this sense of individuality, we can also bring into the picture what is universal. In other words, what is true for every single human being, which of course includes ourselves. And when we do that, we discover that there is another perspective which has a huge bearing on our sense of self. So what is universal? Well, first of all, we can say that the fact that we're alive, we take for granted, but it is universal. And that aliveness is created by the fact that the life energy of the universe, which brings everything alive, it's an animating force in the world, is flowing through us too. So this, if you like, can give us the perspective that we are a child of the universe. In other words, there's a sense there that we're all equal. And going on from that, there are certain abilities that we have built in that we're born with, which no one can take away. They're ours. In other words, we can look at ourselves, our sense of self, as what we already have going for us. You know, we don't have to strive to gain extra stuff. We don't need to work at ourselves or improve ourselves, because when we look at it through this particular lens, we can see that there are things already true about ourselves that have always been true, that won't ever be taken away, which are tremendous talents or abilities that we have. Now, I've made other videos about some of these already. So, for example, if you look up your amazing talent for insight or the everyday miracle of well-being, they cover in a bit more detail two of the aspects that I'm talking about here. But there are others, and maybe they will be subjects for future videos. But here we're talking about our sense of self, our self-esteem. And when we realise that there are certain embedded abilities that we have, certain qualities that are already there, and that there are qualities that are universal, that actually are true for every human being, then comparisons become meaningless. There's no point, because we're all equal on that level. So what we can say to bring this together is that our sense of self will naturally fluctuate. Sometimes we'll feel better about ourselves than other times. Sometimes we might feel quite bad about ourselves. And that's because thoughts fluctuate. Thoughts come and go. Thoughts can occur to us which make us feel really good. And we can have thoughts that occur to us which doubt ourselves, which can bring us down. But the point about thought is that if we leave it alone, it will pass on its own. It's not something we have to leap in and fix. And in fact, if we try to leap in and fix, we make it worse, because we prolong those thoughts, we keep them around for longer, and therefore we keep the disturbing feelings that they bring around for longer. So when you see it like that, there's no blindfold, and you're much freer, and your sense of self is much more fluid, or potentially more fluid. And it means that you're not stuck in any particular meaning or interpretation of sense of self, which is where the freedom comes from. So I hope you find that helpful. I've really enjoyed reflecting on that with you. It's good to be reminded of some of those things. Thank you for watching.